boys and girls. It's Miss Manning. I'm going to be teaching you Unit 2, Module A, Lesson 1, where we read The Road to Freedom. Today, we're going to be learning how to describe how a narrator's point of view influences how events are described. So, we're going to be looking for who the narrator is in our story. That's how we're successful. Who's telling the story? If I'm telling the story about something that happened to me, that's going to be a much different story than if I'm telling a story about something that happened to my friend. We also have to be able to describe the difference between first person point of view and third person point of view, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. First person point of view would be if I'm telling a story about what happened to me, and third person would be if somebody's telling a story about something that happened to somebody else. And there are different words that we use to determine which point of view it is, first person or third person point of view. But we also have to be able to explain how a narrative point of view, how it affects how the story is told. If I'm telling a story about something that happened to me, I'm going to have much more personal details and thoughts about it than if I'm telling you a story about something that happened to my friend or a family member. So let's start talking about points of view. So we have first person point of view and third person point of view. When we're looking at first person point of view, we're going to be seeing words in the text like I, me, my, or we. So it might be like I went to the store and I picked out my favorite brand of bread or whatever it is. But the important mistake to not make is looking for these words within dialogue. So dialogue is when people are talking. So you can't look inside the dialogue and hear a character say, I want that. And then it will say, said Brad. That's not saying that it's in first person point of view. So we have to look at places outside of dialogue. Now, in third person point of view, you're going to see words like he, she, they, or a character's name. So it might be like Sally went to the store and bought her favorite brand of bread. So we're looking for the differences in the words that they're using, the pronouns that they're going to be using to describe or throughout the story. The other thing with first person is we're only going to know what that character sees or hears or things that they already know. In the same way that I, as a human being, don't know what's being said in a different room. You're not going to know if the story is being told from this character's point of view, only one character's point of view. If they're telling the story, you're not going to know what two other characters are doing in another room. You're not going to know anything that that character does not already know. And with third person, we're going to be able to, the narrator will tell you the thoughts and feelings of, it could be one of the characters or it could be multiple characters. There's two different types of point of view for third person. But either way, you're being told from a narrator how they feel about it or how they think about it. Instead of being told by that person, that made me feel sad, you're going to have a narrator tell you that's how they felt. So before we get started with our reading, here's some words that we're going to come across that I just want you to know before we read them. We're going to call them by the way words. So ash cake is a word that you're going to come across. It's a thin, flat cake that's baked into the hot ashes of a fire. So not in the fire themselves, not with the use of a pan or anything like that. They're going to put it in still hot ashes and be able to cook it right there. The other word is North Star. And this is a star that's in the northern part of the sky. It's always in the northern part of the sky. And so people use that when they don't have a compass available or before compasses were a thing to help them figure out which way is north. So we're going to be reading chapter 1 today. While we're reading, I want you to really be thinking about the question, who is the narrator of this story? Is it a specific character? Are we seeing words like I, me, my, or we? Or is it a narrator, somebody not a part of the story, and so we're seeing words like he, she, they, or a character's name? And then also, how does this narrator help the writer better tell Emma's story? So are we only seeing what Emma sees and that's helping us better know the story? Or are we being told what Emma or multiple characters feel, and so that's helping tell the story? Ever since Mama came back to the quarters, she'd been fretting. There was talk in the fields, and folks were saying the master had money troubles. They said selling slaves was the only way he could pay his debts. Last month, the master had sold Uncle Jacob and his woman Mary. They were old and didn't fetch a good price on the auction block. But this time, he was selling the younger ones. Mama knew that meant the master was planning to sell Lula's two boys, Miss Bessie's new baby, and me. I told Mama not to worry. It's just talk is all, Mama, I said, hoping she didn't see my hand shaking while I stirred up supper. But she didn't stop fretting that night or the next nights either. Papa had been gone for 2 winters now. Before he left, he and Mama sat in the cabin by the lantern most nights, talking soft so I couldn't hear. On my pallet, I kept my eyes closed, but my ears were open, listening. We followed this road here along the creek. Papa scratched with a stick on the dirt floor of our cabin for Mama. Someone will be waiting there. Papa talked to folks and slaves who traveled and runaways too. He talked really quietly about how to run and which way north is best. Then one day, when Mama got back from the field, Papa was gone. The master had sold him south, and he'd taken him from the yard where he worked shoeing horses. We never got a chance to say goodbye. Me and Mama cried so hard, I thought we'd never stop. And after that, there was no more talk about running. But now, with folks talking about the auction block, Mama said they'd sell me and she'd never see me again. We're all the family each other have, Emma, Mama said, looking deep into my eyes. She took my hand, and we knelt on the cabin floor, praying long and hard into the night for mercy and deliverance. When we turned the lantern down and settled on our pallets, Mama slept soundly for the first night all week. When she woke in the morning, Mama told me she had a dream about a drinking gourd, a quilt on a fence, and a river as wide as a road. She said that it was a sign, showing her the way north to freedom. We gotta run, she told me. We leave tonight. Never in my life had a day felt so long. Each hour felt like 2, and my mouth was dry just thinking about running. Me and Mama knew that most who ran didn't make it. The runaways they caught came back and were punished hard. No one who was caught ever ran again. When Mama came back from turning the fields, she put aside some ash cake and a bit of salted meat. We each put on an extra shift, and Mama wrapped my feet with cloth. The chill hit us as soon as we opened the door to the night, but chances were better if we traveled in the cold, when the river turned to ice and was hard enough to cross on foot. That night, we left with our food tied tight in a scarf, the clothes on our backs, and only the North Star to guide us. So now that we've read the chapter, we can go over some vocabulary words that we came across. Our first one is debts. So you might be thinking of some words that you've heard that have the word debt in it, like debtor or indebted. Those might be words that help you determine what the word debt means. But if you don't have the knowledge of those words, we can also use context clues throughout the text. So if we're reading this sentence, they said selling slaves was the only way he could pay his debts. I think this phrase, pay his debts, means that it has something to do with money. But we can also kind of go up a little bit farther. There was talk in the fields, and folks were saying the master had money trouble. So that really does hammer home the point that it is about money, and he needs to start selling something. So when you have to sell something because you're having money problems, you probably owe people something, or you need to make a payment on something. So those context clues really help us determine the meanings of the words. Our next word is auction. So they were old and didn't fetch a good price on the auction block, but this time he was selling the younger ones. So some of you might already know what auction means, or you might think of the word auctioneer. We always have to think of words that we know that are similar to it, but we also can look around the word in the text and use our context clues to help us figure out. So we're obviously fetching a price. So again, it has something to do with money, but let's back up a little bit more. Last month, the master had sold Uncle Jacob and his woman, Mary. So we're talking about selling something. And then later, after the word auction, it says that they were selling the younger one. So it's obviously somewhere where you go to sell something. And in this case, the auction block is where they went to sell people. And our last word, master. This is a word that can have multiple meanings. We think of mastery when you're in control of something or you have full understanding of it. But we have master kind of all over the page. There was talk in the fields, and folks were saying the master had money troubles. So the master makes me think that it's a person. They said selling the slaves was the only way he could pay his debts. So it's a person, and I've got this word slaves to think of. Last month, the master had sold Uncle Jacob and his woman Mary. And then down here, Mama knew that meant the master was planning to sell Lula's 2 boys, Miss Bessie's new baby, and me. So also selling, but they're selling the slaves. So it's a person who is selling slaves, but also who owns the slaves. So they own slaves and they also can sell them. That's what's going to help you understand what they mean by master in this case. It's somebody who owns slaves and sells slaves. So now we know that Emma is our narrator, but we still might not be sure as to which person this story is being told in. Is it in first person when they use words like I, my, or is it second person where they use words like characters' names or they or she? So this is page 4 of the passage, and if you look, underlined in red are words like mama, she, they, he, they. Those are all words that would lead me to believe that this is third person if I were simply to just look in the text. But if I look down below in the passage, I see a lot of words like I and my, which would lead me to believe that it's first person. So the question is, which is it? If the passage has both, well, my question for you would be, if I were to tell a story, could I ever say, I went to the store and Sally went to the store with me? Could I ever use characters' names in telling a story? Could I ever say, I went to a friend's house and she came over? I could. So the key is, because we have these I's that are not within just dialogue, not within what she said. It's not like she said, I said, don't worry. It's, I told Mama not to worry. And then in the dialogue, we don't see either of those words. So in this case, this story is being told in first person narrative. And we know that because of words like I and my throughout the story. And that's just from one page. If we were to continue, we might find other words. Let's read this passage from chapter 1 to see if we can figure out some more clues as to why Emma is the narrator and how it helps our story. We followed this road here along the creek. Papa scratched with a stick on the dirt floor of the cabin for Mama. Someone will be waiting there. Papa talked to folks and slaves who traveled and runaways too. He talked real quietly about how to run and which way north is best. So we know in the story that Papa is no longer a part of their family. He's been taken away. But she's telling this story, which means that it's something that she already knew. This is a moment, a memory. We know that she was laying on her cot or her bed, and she was listening to what her parents were saying. So this is something that's already happened, and we're hearing her point of view of it, what she heard him say. So that tells me that she's telling a story about her father, what she's already overheard, something that she knows in her head. So what I want you to do is I want you to look throughout the story and look for maybe another moment that she's already heard, or maybe you look for a moment that she's experiencing and how she felt, because that's the whole point of Emma as our narrator, is we're getting a different point of view, a different perspective on the story because it's being told from Emma's point of view. All right, that's all I have for you guys. I will see you again soon. Bye.